Hello and welcome to Say Hi to the Future, Ingenious Thinkers, a podcast aimed at highlighting the human side of ingenuity. My name is Ken Tenser, curator of Say Hi to the Future, helping leaders think differently in the face of uncertainty and ambiguity. Better thinking, better outcomes. With me today is Diondra Filicetti, founder of Driven by Co., a learning and engagement company focused on helping people and teams discover what motivates them. She's a TEDx speaker, facilitator, and author whose work blends psychology, leadership, and human connection to build healthier, purpose-driven workplaces. And Diondra has recently become a best-selling author of the book Engagement Economics. Diondra, welcome to Say Hi to the Future.
Hi, I'm saying hi to you. I'm saying hi to the future. Hi to the listeners.
So let's start with your career path. Not completely traditional, and I think actually embedded in there is a love of soccer, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, you know what? That part of the story is a tragedy, actually.
Oh, great! What an opening question.
Yes, but I'll weave it all in. To give you the soccer story, I ended up retiring, I guess, from soccer. I had to have 2 knee surgeries from a torn ACL, PCL, and twice my meniscus. So it's something that I don't get to enjoy anymore. But I did play in a lot of leagues, co-ed leagues. I even played in a men's league once, which was fun. So it really, that was also a way of networking for me as well when I was doing that. But my career kind of involved a lot of changes. And I think a lot of people end up switching from their field of study. And I studied graphic communications management at what was then known as Ryerson, now known as Toronto Metropolitan University. And then I worked in a large packaging company for about 4 years, which taught me a lot about many different things. And then I left knowing that I wanted to do something in the realm of training, facilitation, communication, because I kept getting asked to do training and onboarding while I was at that company. And I thought, well, this is not really my job, but I kind of like it. And didn't really know what I was doing, but I tried to do some workshops at that time. And then I went back to George Brown College formally to do adult learning and education and kind of formalized some of the training that I offer today. And I had a real interest in employee engagement. So I kind of just dived deep in that realm.
Wow. So what was that first moment where you go, oh, wow, this is pretty cool. I know I'm a graphic designer or trained in graphic design, but I should be doing something totally different.
Yeah. So, and funny enough, it's the graphic communications is sort of a misnomer because it's not really graphic design. It was, basically the whole workflow from design to production. So basically, if you worked in advertising and marketing, like you would understand, like, how do I bring, a product to life? Like, how do I label this product? What materials are involved? So it was less graphic design and more like production, which is really interesting. However, the moment that I realized that was simply being asked to do things that I thought weren't traditionally part of my role. So doing the plant tours and doing training when I was the newest employee, I'm like, shouldn't someone a little bit more senior be doing this? But I kept coming my way and I thought, okay, well, I must be good at it. They think so. But I just really liked it. And then I just didn't want to do the rest of my work. I wanted to do that.
Okay. So you do that, you like that. There's a lot of ways you can go. I mean, other than starting your own business Driven by Co. I mean, you could work for a lot of other companies. You could work education wise. Like, what was sort of that gumption or driver saying, yeah, you know what? Not only do I want to change my career, I want to go it alone.
I tend to be a very fast-paced person, and working in the corporate world, things move slowly because there's multiple layers of approval. And so initially I just thought, why don't I just try this? So it was more of a test or an experiment for me. And then realizing that I could implement things so quickly and just try things out, I would try a project here and then figure out, okay, that doesn't work, and then move on to the next thing. My learning journey went from this to this. And so I thought, okay, if I'm learning this quickly, like eventually I'm going to land on something that's going to work. But in the meantime, I was gaining so much experience so quickly that I thought if I go anywhere else, like that learning journey is going to be so lengthy. And I didn't think that was valuable. So I thought if I could spend my 20s doing more as opposed to doing less, I think that'll build me a better foundation than if I just go somewhere else and wait for work to be handed to me or wait for tasks to be given to me. Why don't I just go and try it? But I went in with the expectation, like, if it doesn't work out, no problem. I'll just go back.
Okay. But so you're fast paced. Corporations aren't fast paced or not many or not necessarily. So who do you target then? Because you've got to sort of work at the pace of your market.
Yeah, this is a good point. And so I target both. So in my work, I work a lot with both small companies and schools. So, and also other organizations. So I'm often doing, so for instance, there is a business incubator program in the city of Mississauga called Idea Mississauga. They're the entrepreneurship hub. So I often do programming for them, for entrepreneurs, in the realm of communication, sales communication. And you're right, because selling to larger companies is a slower process. So your sales cycle is a lot longer, but, putting out the content and attending networking events, like it comes full circle, and eventually after building those relationships and investing that time, it eventually comes your way.
Okay, Diondra, so I totally understand the incubator side and the entrepreneurial side. You mentioned a little bit about education, I mean, that may be the only thing that works more slowly than corporations. Sorry, and I'm a prophet a lot of schools. I'm not sure I should be saying it, but it's true. Yeah,
this is very true. So upcoming, I have a session with Sheridan College. Mm-hmm. And funny enough, when it came to me, it was because of a relationship that I had built in 2024, in May of 2024. And they had kind of been watching my content online, saw the book come out, and just seeing some of the things that I was talking about. So it was after over a year that it came to light. In addition to that, I'm also in secondary schools, doing like communication workshops that are targeted at younger individuals, or entrepreneurship workshops targeted at younger individuals. And you'd actually be surprised at how quickly teachers like to move in the secondary world, which I thought that was very surprising for me. They seem to be movers and shakers, and if you meet the right one, they kind of just find a way to make it happen, and it happens.
Well, I love to hear that you're in, so I take it as more of a high school type of situation as well?
Yeah, so that's part of it. So I have some workshops that are basically like my main workshop offerings, just small portions of them that we work on, like one little skill. Yeah.
But, so how do you find it? I mean, working with high schoolers specifically, or recent grads, I mean, the world has changed. I mean, we've gone back to hieroglyphs and not speaking to one another or not being in the same room. So, what I really like about what you're saying is you seem to be bringing back some of the emotional engagement skills, but what do you find walking into these rooms?
It's exceptionally challenging with the younger individuals, for sure. They're very much attached to devices. There's definitely a sense of disconnection, but there's also a desire for connection. They just don't know how to go about it. So I do find the workshops are definitely slower paced, and there's a lot of work that needs to be done in terms of building relationships so that they're comfortable talking in front of one another and sharing their opinions. Whereas when I'm in the corporate world, like, that's not the case. People are very excited, and they're very much encouraged to share their opinions. They're ready to say, okay, well, this is what I think. This is how I've been feeling. They've been waiting for this opportunity. So it's two very, very different worlds, and both bring very unique challenges to me, which kind of keeps me on my toes as well.
Very cool. And again, I'm really glad that that's getting into the high school arena as well. So But you talk about corporate, and you said, they're there and they're wanting to be heard and get their voice out. Are they listened to? I mean, because there's sort of a flip side to what you're doing. I mean, it's great. It's great to get your voice out. But I walked into an organization once, and they said, Ken, this is going to be really challenging. And I said, why? And they said, well, we did program a couple of years ago. We had about 800 submissions, and then they sat there. I'm like, okay, this is going to be fun. So not only was it challenging, I walked into the room and it was like hostile. It's like another one of you people, you're going to help me speak and deliver ideas and no one's going to listen and blah, blah, blah. So, Diondra, is that sort of something you talk to the organization about? Like, it's one thing to be heard. It's another thing to act on it.
Yeah, that is definitely a big part of the conversation. So, two things. It depends on what the purpose of the training is for. So sometimes I get involved in training that's more positive and more skill building. So it's really important to know who's in the audience. So I try to put together an audience profile before I do anything to understand, okay, A, what are the demographics that I'm walking into? What are the type of personalities that I'm walking into? And then I heavily prepare in that sense to make sure it's relatable. For the most part, most of what I do is there tends to be a level of positivity, because of the approach, and you have to disarm people from the very beginning. So that might mean like telling a story or making a joke. I remember I was in a construction company at the beginning of this year. And so, in the meetings leading up to that, it was going to be very challenging. Like these people I was told that they're very much, they have strong opinions. They are experts in their craft, so they're not going to enjoy being told what to do. And so I framed the whole thing as like, little jokes and little things that were relatable while injecting what I needed to say in between. And it turned out very, very well. So I started it by just making a joke about winter tires and traffic on the 401 for those that live in Canada. And that landed really well. I did some examples with things that they were interested in. So I used a NASCAR example, construction examples. So I had to be very careful about the design, so that once they're disarmed and once they're interested in what you have to say as the speaker, then just interjecting some of the things that you need to deliver becomes a little bit easier.
Oh, that sounds great. And you're right. That is critical. I've also faced that too in different ways, especially sort of at that C-suite level where, people are obviously pretty brilliant at what they do. And they sort of assume that brilliance will just sort of become part of their, the next thing they do, which sometimes happens, but often doesn't. So I love the way you frame it and engage, organizations that way.
Yeah, engagement is my thing.
Yeah. So let's talk about a book called Engagement Economics then. Let's start with the fact that you wrote this by hand.
Yeah, I know people think that's crazy, but it's for those who have ever written a book, like it's a lot of work. And by the time I was in the middle of it, I was like, oh my gosh, I don't know how I'm going to finish this. But what I did to force myself was take a notebook to a restaurant and just sit there and eat by myself and write. So by the time I went home, I had to have pages done. And, it's a lot easier to do that than to just be on your computer at home in your office, being distracted by all these notifications. So writing it by hand was a way of like making progress for me. So I would purposely take myself into different environments where I had to produce something. And then it's easier to improve on what you've produced as opposed to sitting there looking at a blank Word document, trying to come up with something.
And did you find writing it by hand, you had, maybe even a greater connection with each word that you were using?
I didn't quite notice that, to be honest. It was more like what I noticed what I would do is write out a little bit and then type it up. And I noticed I was making a lot of, because I was writing it as if I was speaking. So I was just
Right.
kind of writing out my thoughts. So there was a lot of mistakes that I as I was translating it, I was like, oh, I could have said this way better. And then I would edit it and make it better. So it was more like translate your thoughts and narrate your thoughts onto the page. So I didn't necessarily notice that, but I did feel like as I'm narrating my thoughts, I was trying to keep up with what I was thinking because I'm writing so slowly.
Well, first off, let me say I wish you were born about 30, 35 years earlier. You could have written all of my essays by hand for me. Not a problem. And I gotta tell you, when we move from, sorry if I'm showing my age, everyone, but as we move from dumb terminals to computers and then personal computers, well, boy, I'm so glad we have them. Funny thing is, I'm joking about it, but when I say making a connection to the words of things, I still start every book I write or every course I develop by sketching on graph paper. Mm-hmm. And I actually make sure that I never use the lines. So the graph paper reminds me to always let your thought go where you want it to go or where it needs to go, not within these little blocks. And I don't know. That's
how come you don't use blank paper then?
I don't know, because I think it gives me sort of that juxtaposition actually of where I'm going into is going to be cubicled. And it sort of reminds me that I have to pull them away, but I have to make it a step or an insight or an understanding that somehow links back to who and where they are today.
Yeah.
Because if you go to, and again, it goes back to knowing your audiences. Some audiences, if I speak at like a World Innovation conference, I can go pretty far into what I've studied or researched or whatever. Depending on the corporate audience and where they are in the type of industry, if I achieve a baby step, I'm ecstatic and they're ecstatic and it makes an impact. So I think there's just that juxtaposition of, we are very process driven. We are very cubicled. There's always going to be a need for process and steps within business, but I sort of overlay it with, I don't know, just freedom of thought, I guess.
Mm-hmm. All right. I like that.
Now back to my interview view.
Sorry.
No, I'm glad you asked. So tell us about engagement economics. Like, what does that actually mean? What does it do for the reader?
Mm-hmm. So I named it Engagement Economics because the whole book ties engagement back to a business case for productivity, for profitability, for performance. And essentially I talk about the fact that employees want to be engaged. It's just that we often miss the mark on giving them what they need in order to be engaged. And I define engagement economics as, like the word economics is tied to the production of goods and services, but engagement economics is how engagement is related to that production. And there are so many studies on different facets of engagement, but the way I define it is discretionary effort. Discretionary effort is how much more above what you have to do are you willing to do? Like how much more above the bare minimum? And we see that oftentimes employees begin a job or a career very much engaged and very much willing to go above and beyond. And somewhere along the lines, the environment that they're placed in sort of knocks that engagement down. And so what are the things that we're missing? What needs are we not meeting that is causing this engagement to be reduced? And therefore how much productivity and how much performance are we missing out on?
That's very cool. And I love the way you're framing, but flip it for me. How do we build it? How do we build it in? Because, again, it goes back to, the short discussion about, corporations who've done it before. People want to speak out. It's got to be listened to. I mean, for me, and you just said it. I mean, if somebody wants to be engaged and you keep ignoring that or putting blockades to it, barriers to it, it's got to go away. So Diondra, how do you flip it and say, what are the 2-3 things I need to do to start breaking those barriers down?
Yeah, that's a huge problem. So it's, do we even listen to them? Do our employees actually, because what happens is that first employees will speak up, but then A, they're not listened to, or B, sometimes there's consequence for speaking out. So eventually there becomes this culture of silence and not actually, which creates a blind spot because now we don't know what's going on. And so it's difficult because sometimes leaders are faced with thinking that, this is an opinion of one person and therefore it's not a universal opinion. But how do I figure out what is universal in my organization if the survey doesn't work and, people are not telling me the information that I need to know, which could be a result of bad questions, or it could be a result of people not answering them in the way that is useful for you. However, what I've done with engagement economics to sort of give leaders more of a tool in order to overcome this issue is frame it as a hierarchy of needs. So we've all heard of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and we know that, we need to have food and water and shelter before we care about, our ego, and our higher level needs for fulfillment. The same goes for engagement. And so at the base of the pyramid, I have 3 levels in it. The base of the pyramid is the environment that we're operating in. And so there are certain characteristics of an environment that is conducive to engagement. And so it's things like having the ability to expand. Is there space for expansion? And sometimes we get trapped up in, this is the position that we need to fulfill. And we need to put a person here without any plan for where they go next. And then once they leave after a couple of years, we're like, oh, we can't find anybody who's loyal, who stays. But at the end of the day, especially nowadays, people want to move around. They want to move up. They want to get experience and keep going. So if you haven't built that into your environment, you're going to lose people. That's just one thing. There's also, making sure that we're investing in culture. And by investment, I don't even necessarily mean we have to put a ton of money towards this. It's just managing the type of behavior that is acceptable, right? And we need to nip those bad behaviors in the butt, right? Before we have this huge workplace tension that people don't want to be in.
So how do you figure out though, you talk to your process, you're going in and you're talking to engagement and whatnot. How do you figure out your process? How do you research your process to make it compelling?
So can you reframe that? Is that if you're a leader and you're looking at how to increase engagement?
Well, I'm thinking about, the book, what went into researching engagement economics, coming up with some of the applications or process that you speak to.
Oh, yeah. So it was a ton of research and also interviews with leaders and what they have done to create successful cultures. And the same themes kept coming up. So it was the same buzzwords, autonomy, ability for growth. And through the research and some of the different studies that I looked at, it became a matter of organizing it because, I kind of just looked at how do you apply this particular concept to this situation. And so people talk a lot about purpose. That's one big buzzword when it comes to engagement. But purpose, you can give people purpose, but if they're showing up to work in an environment that they feel stifled in, or, there's someone that really is pissing them off every single day, or, they don't have any control over anything, what does purpose really mean at that point? So it became a function of looking at the different buzzwords that contribute to engagement, that there's tons of research on, there's tons of information online on, and organizing in a way that's actually useful instead of just throwing all these words at different leaders and being like, okay, implement purpose, give them autonomy, do this, do that. But what's the order in which I should do that?
Is there a way that you sort of test whether the purpose is being accepted and or embraced? I guess one of the organizations that I work with was pretty big, and they were used surveys, quantitative, and they were going, well, we have these great reactions on surveys, but it doesn't work in real life. And I said, well, you're just asking silly things like, well, not silly, but yeah. Have you noticed that we've added more snacks or more break times? So the answer is yes. And they're going, hey, 99% of people have noticed the changes. But then you go and ask them qualitatively in a workshop and they go, we don't give a damn.
Yeah.
You get to work at home, but you still phone in and they tell you no. So do you find that kind of problem?
Yes, 100, because, leaders fall into this trap. That's why you really need, you need someone on the outside or externally to do and conduct these surveys. It's very hard to not be biased and not want to just validate your existing efforts when you're doing your own surveys. And I mean, I'm sure, at the beginning of your career, you've probably filled out one of these surveys like, oh, here's another bullshit survey, da 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 da.
By hand, Diondra, by hand.
Oh boy.
I'm telling the truth.
I believe it. But yeah, the questions are like, well, you're kind of like, well, I mean, yeah, I have to answer yes to whether I've noticed that there's more snacks in the lunchroom, but are you going to ask me if I'm overwhelmed with the amount of work I have? Are you going to ask me how I feel about coming into work today? Are you going to ask me how I feel about my coworkers? Are you going to ask me the questions that actually give you data to make a decision, that instead of giving you stats to boast about?
Yeah.
And that's where you need someone else to do it, to catch this bias in the questions. So
I also love that you're using the word bias. I'm just finishing up doctoral research around solving wicked challenges, and one of the key points I found was people talk about barriers as time, money, people, and what I showed through this research process was that the bias is probably the biggest killer of any idea or stifling of any idea today. So I truly love that you are bringing that out and hopefully, sort of watching and managing it in what you're doing.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, I'm glad that you shared that research with me, because that's a very interesting perspective, but I also think it's very true. Very true, because somehow, some way, whenever something becomes priority, they always find the time and the people to get it done, right? But yet, when it's an idea that someone's bringing to you, it's like, oh, but it's not going to work. Oh, but we can't because of this. But when they really want to make it happen, there's somehow resources available. So it absolutely is a function of bias, I would think so.
So time goes pretty quickly. So, you know what? Let's end on a very, very light question.
Oh boy.
Okay. So you talk about engagement and why people come to work in the future. There's some massive changes going on. The whole notion that AI is not going to reduce jobs is simply ridiculous. It already is. And what you see is, a lot of entrepreneurs are saying, well, no, I'm not going to fire anybody, but they're also not going to hire anybody because they now can do the same work at 10 people for 5, which means that our unemployment rates are going to go up. People will be on the street. And unless, I'll give you the positive side, unless, like many entrepreneurs, you take the extra net income and you start a new business or you expand. So there is a bright light, but the reality is the people you are working with probably have a lot of fear as to, am I going to be around and am I going to be relevant? So why be engaged?
Yeah.
How's that for a nice light ender? Let's just you sort of casually say goodbye. Nice to meet you,
I know. Yeah, but I absolutely agree. I really think that already people are boasting how much they're able to accomplish with the help of AI. But I also think the flip side of that is that a lot of people are tired of AI. And what I mean by that is, you go online and social media and it's like all the articles sound the same. Captions sound the same. You're scrolling on Instagram and you're unsure of whether this cute video of this cat is real or AI. So I think there's also a real frustration with AI, which is going, I'm not sure, but we're going to say hi to the future here. I think it's going to encourage people to start seeking those real experiences again, because they're unsure of whether these virtual experiences are real and authentic. And so that said, I think there's going to be a resurgence of communication skills that are going to be necessary. And I think there's going to be a resurgence of, skills that, like, more tangible skills. So I think we're going to see a shift, which is going to be very interesting. While at the same time, the digital world and AI is becoming such a standard part of our lives. So I really don't know where all this is going to merge and where this is all going to go. But what I do know is that communication skills to stand out is going to be very, very important, because what percentage of resumes are done by AI now? And so how are you able to weed people out when you're looking to hire someone? It's going to be in that interview. So if you're not practicing your presentation skills and your communication skills, very quickly, that's going to become evident once you have the real experiences. So I'm not sure where it's going to go, but I know there are certain skills that are definitely going to become extremely more valuable.
So let me say, I love that answer. There's so many articles about the middling of our communication skills, that our emails are written by AI, how we summarize things. And you're basically sending up a signal to the world that you don't need me. You're telling people that a computer can think and write and motivate people more quickly than I can as a human being. So I think that's a problem. And to your point, it does take out originality, and it does take out personality from it. It's truly wonderful. And I see that in the work I do. You take interviews, you transcribe them, the computer does it in 2 seconds. So I don't need to sit and type like somebody did 20 years ago. That's great. You read it, you come up with your top points. That's great. Then you can ask a computer to do it as well for comparison. But to your point, Diondra, it's just don't let your originality go missing.
Yeah, because otherwise you'll just become, I don't want to use the word bland, but I kind of want to use the word bland.
Yeah, bland and much easier to be replaced. So, Diondra Filicetti, founder of Driven by Co. and author of Engagement Economics. Thank you so much for joining me and for entertaining some of these roundabout questions.
My pleasure. This was a lot of fun, Ken. Thank you so much for having me and allowing me to say hi to the future.
Take care. If you enjoyed this episode and you want to support our show, leave us a review and join our mailing list by visiting www.spyder.works. That's SPYDER.works, and subscribe to our channel. Leave us a comment with who we should interview next. Thank you for listening, and see you all next Friday.